pricing was. How did you discover and go about pricing, knowing that you needed to, you can tell you what you're actually asking someone what they're willing to pay and actually having them pay doesn't always work.
Yeah.
So curious, like how you figured out how to price it and how much folks were willing to pay, especially the discovery process.
Yeah.
And then a more general question is, if you had a technology that was superior to all the others, why couldn't you be a recycler yourself? You ever consider that?
You mean like him being
Yeah.
like a
doing it
recall
yourself.
student?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that is a heavy lift.
I'll answer that one quickly. I won't take the whole.
Yeah. It's just like because it applies for other technologies, but I'm curious, like, did that ever come to your mind?
It did come to our mind. If you go back to like 2019, me and my co-founder had this like sketch of like what's going to happen to Glacier in 10 years. Literally, we know how long it takes to build hardware. One of the steps was it was like build the robot, build this like next technology that's even better than the robot, then build like and so recycling facility is known as a MRF, MRF. So you're like build the automated MRF, and then one of the problems with recycling is that there's not enough MRFs everywhere. It's like this was definitely on the roadmap. Why haven't we done it? That is an OpEx challenge. That's an operations game. If you're trying to do it, you're building. We're building one robot right now that does one thing inside of these facilities. To build that, you either need like 4 magic technologies and like heaven come in news as yet, or you need to like be okay with some non-automation, but then you're playing an operations game. And we're a tech company, we won't play an operations game. You don't get to scale playing an operations game. The third bit of that is like I'm also then going to compete with my customers, which is a terrible thing to do for your product market fit, because then they don't want to buy from you. Like this literally happened to one of the early customer we talked about, early competitor. They had the same idea. They started building their own facilities, and what do you know? Like nobody bought their robots anymore. It's like I'm not buying from you. You're literally trying to take my markets. And so like they lost their entire customer base for that first product, which is good for us. The first question was
pricing. Yeah.
So for us, and I don't know how this will apply to other folks in the room, but for us, we weren't so concerned with like market pricing. We were concerned with unit economics. So you go to a recycling facility. The math is actually pretty easy. It's so easy I can explain it to you. Right now, you pay a person to do sortation. That is a cost and a value. How much value is that person producing? How much are they costing? Most of the time, in fact, when we install, there's actually no person there. There's just lost value from that person not being there. Either way, those are both quantifiable numbers. And I can say, cool, by not having a person there, you are losing $45,000 a year, $70,000 or whatever it might be. I can do that analysis. It's pretty straightforward for these facilities because they are effectively just like processing streams of stuff, and each volume is worth something. And from there, it's pretty easy to say, okay, look, if I gave you a robot, what kind of payback period would be satisfying for this industry? And then you just price based off of that. And so for this instance, we did a lot of research on the question, not how much would you pay, but when you think about equipment, what sort of payback period is expected out of equipment we purchase, right? And again, get the same answer. 2 years would be great, 3 years is standard, 5 years is like okay, but tolerable. And so I took those numbers and like, cool, 2 years is great. You say, let me give you a 2-year payback period. As long as that number delivers us a healthy enough margin to like satisfy our investors, we found the sweet spot. In our case, it did. We could say, hey, we can give you 2-year payback period for the typical facility, usually less than that, and we can make 60% margins on our product. So like that's the great thing to do. We'll do it. We also happen to know our competitors' pricing, and it was also happened to be significantly cheaper than them, but that actually didn't really influence why we priced the way we did. Pricing was because we wanted to, again, go back to it is product market fit except for the economic part of the brain. What would you be willing to pay? And do research on that, not just asking them what would you be willing to pay. There's always a reason that they'd be willing to pay some certain dollar amount. Like if you just get their intuition, you're going to get lies, basically.
Before we go to yours, can I add one thing about infrastructure? I think I would think of it as almost like you being, let's say, a VPN provider versus building an entire data, data center, yes. So it's cost heavy, and like physical buildings and infrastructure is so expensive unless you have a lot of money. It's like Gmail, and then they are now building data centers.
Yeah.
So you wanna make that much money before you actually go into it. So analysis.
I'm curious how you prioritize the robot versus the data and analytics layer, and how you validate product market fit for one and then the other. I see the natural tie-in, and it makes sense to have the robots first, and there's some data that you're gathering in that process, but it sounds like you're doing even more on the data collection outside of what the robots will do. So curious kind of how that process works and how you prioritize even now from one versus the other.
A great question, and it's really like you're pressing on exactly what we're focused on today. So we'll get to modern day Glacier with this question, which is awesome. So we didn't start building the data platform for a couple of years at Glacier. They kind of sat there stagnant as an idea. We built the bones of it, but like didn't really like try to product it or sell it, except for a couple of pilot customers early on. And the reason for this was the same exact story I'm saying over and over again. I talked to customers, and now we had an idea. We were like, okay, well, I have my robot, my pilot robots there. I'm collecting all these images. One thing I've noticed is like toying around with my data is like, I can actually tell you some cool stuff about this line. You interested? And I would go talk to folks about that. Like really early on, so 2019, 2020, 2021, we would pose this question. It's like, hey, like, look at this data. Like I was literally showing like my internal dashboard, like not a real product, like look what I can show you. And we got a lot of feedback early that indicated the market was bifurcated. So there's a group of people that was really curious about this data, and there's a group of people who were like, I don't need you to tell me how to run my plants. I don't need this freaking like 20-some-year-old tech guy from Silicon Valley telling me how to like run a recycling plant. What does he know? And there were some people who were like tech forwards, like, oh yeah, like I believe in technology, I believe in information. So we saw this bifurcation, and we said, okay, that's going to be a problem for we can maybe get half this market, or we can target half this market. That's already kind of small, and we're only going to get like a slice of that anyway. So like all of a sudden our market got halved, and that became a lot less attractive for us as a product to go after, especially when as a startup, it's really critical that you can appeal to everybody so you can start marketing yourself and start building connections, et cetera. So we put that on ice. We like had, I think, 2 pilot customers out there. They were just kind of like chugging along, but we were not really investing in it. I mentioned that like 4-day turnaround time to build that period comparison tool. One of the customers asked for it, it seemed really low. But other than that, we were sitting stagnant on that. On the flip side, the robot, like everybody was like, this makes so much sense. Like we put it in, we have someone else from some other facility come check out our pilot. Like, I get it. I get why this is better than those other ones. And so if you just listen to those 2 feedbacks we got by showing off these pilots or even these beta products, it became very clear which direction the market was pulling and which one we should wait on. I think that can probably apply generally to any product. Like you get a couple of things out there, let people toy around with it, understand how it might work for them, and then hear their feedback there. But the feedback we got was pretty straightforward. You can tell when they're excited versus they're like going along with things. And I think I do a good job of making sure that customers aren't just like trying to flatter me by making sure they are telling me what they actually care about. I understand the logic behind it. If you zip forward in time, we're starting, and in fact, we have done a pretty good job of like opening up the AI angle of our business because we keep these conversations going, right? It's like there as a product, but we're selling the robot, and we go to the robot people and say, hey, by the way, this robot has seen like X, Y, and Z. So we started to develop these little like case studies for them. I put a robot in your facility. It's picking, plastic bottles off of the line going to landfill. And I said, hey, by the way, did you know that like you have been, after our robot, you've been losing $12,000 a month in terms of commodities you could have recovered? And they're like, no, I didn't know that. And all of a sudden we have like a weapon, like, would you like to know more about your facility? Because we had it. And so because we've been in this space, because people trust us, now they're more interested in the data. And we're also starting to see, obviously, with the AI craze, people are just like, oh yeah, I want AI in my facility. So that's obviously a boom to us as well. And so now we are like turning the heat up under the AI pot to get a lot more of that stuff going. I have an interesting story to tell on that, but I'll pause in case there's other questions. Yeah.
I was just kind of curious about the prototyping and testing phase. When you had your first version of the robot, I'm sure it's not easy to get these people to invest time and effort to work with you on testing these things and giving you feedback. It's not trivial. What kind of challenges did you face there? How did you go about it?
Yeah, great question. My trick was to make it painless. How can you have them pilot your technology without it being a cost to them, without it being an annoyance to them? In our space, which is like a very physical space, what that literally meant was, can I find a spot in your facility that you don't even think about, you don't even care about, but if I put a robot there, it might add like some incremental value. Or maybe it won't even add any value, but like it won't hurt you and it'll let me test out a machine. And so the first facility, this guy, Ricky, down in San Jose, right? I went through his facility, he's like, this is a line that like technically if you recovered bottles from, you'd be saving me money. And I have no people staffed here. I've never been down here in my life. And I was like, cool, that sounds like the place I want for my robot. And so for him, as long as the robot like didn't literally like tip over and break his conveyor belts, he was fine with it. What I did was I found a way to not make it a pain for him. In fact, to make it so painless, he could blink his eyes and forget it was there. And so that we can actually do our R&D and figure it out. And then whenever I wanted him to come look at it, I could have him come look at it. Like, oh, by the way, like here's this new feature. By the way, I'm working on this thing, and so like maybe next robot we can put it somewhere you do care about because it's actually starting to prove itself. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
So once you have this single product market fit that you talked about, how do you go about looking for other verticals? Like there might be other buyers, like you have the regulators you're talking about that might be interested in what's being thrown away. You have landfills that are also in the space, like they're invested in recycling as well. Like
Yeah.
how do you decide if there's that same product can apply to other clients, or do you have to like make adjustments to make that effective?
So we have a couple of other verticals. Let me talk just about the robot. The same should apply for the data. We have a couple other verticals that the robots could apply to. So as a reminder, we do municipal recycling, which is like you, the consumer, put your blue bin on the curb. That goes over to a recycling facility on MRF, and that is our target customer. We could also apply very similar technology to composting. We can apply it to e-waste. We can apply it to what's known as reclaimers. So the people who buy bales of PET or paper from these MRFs. So there's a couple other verticals around the space that we could focus on. But I think strategically we have chosen not to, because our belief, and I have less proof that this is the right belief, but it is the belief that my co-founder and I hold, is that we have to get very strong victory in one market first instead of spreading ourselves out into several. Especially in our space, and this, I don't know how this will apply to other markets that people are in here, but in our space, reputation and relationships mean everything. I think that's going to be true for a lot of people in the climate space because you're not dealing with your SaaS startups or whatever. But there's a couple hundred businesses who do recycling in the US, and they all talk to each other all the time, and they all go to the same golf tournaments and all of this sort of stuff, right? It's like if you develop a bad reputation with one person who's important, or a couple of people who are not so important, you're screwed. So I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that we are focusing our attention on the markets instead of putting our 10% here and our 20% there and our 30% there, because then we're bound to burn somebody, and then that's going to spread like wildfire through our market, and that's going to ruin our chance of winning that market. So our intention has been very much let's just keep this market in mind. We're going to make sure that people love us in this market. Once we get to that point, yeah, let's turn our attention to other verticals. But until then, I'm staying focused.
These are all really
Uh-huh.
a really long time. The climate community is really small. I may share a tiny funny story.
I've been talking too much.
Yeah, no. I met this one person back when I was in university. I had graduated and I had started working. I met someone who was very negative about the climate space, but he was also in climate space. For some reason. But I met him, and then 2 days later, we had this gathering, and my friend was asking me, "Hey, I heard you met this person. I don't know how they heard. How did the conversation go?" And I was saying, "Hey, he was being very negative, and he was standing right behind you." So that's how small the community is. So.
You can imagine that if you are dealing with a market,
Markets, yes.
with a small number of customers, how quickly word about you, the startup, will spread.
Yeah. And also, a friend of a friend was marrying that guy. That's why they were asking me the opinion. So I was not much help. It's a reputation. Yes.
What's up?
Guys, are you guys venture backed? And so do you have certain expectations of you know, like, I totally hear you on the initial folks, you wanna win your initial market, it makes sense. But also, as you said, there aren't that many players in this, like, burst in the country, and that sort of startup motion comes with expectations of like, path to giant TAM, right? And I've talked about that.
This is probably like a whole separate talk called like how to pick the right investors. But one thing that we're particularly proud of is the investors who are on our team right now. We have been very selective to find people who are not just here for the money, and who understand hard work and understand climate, because those two things are very different than your traditional investors. You win in these spaces by being good and being slow, not by sprinting. Like climate companies, like I don't know, does anyone know a climate company that like OpenAI and just like took? I don't think it happens, right? We win by like understanding the market, developing reputation, building a really good reputation, and like slowly becoming very, very strongly rooted. With that in mind, I don't want an investor who believes the opposite, who believes it's like you have to go and sell. I wasn't in the boardroom, but our competitor, I'll just say their name, Amp. If you guys know Amp Robotics, they were the first one in the space. They've gone all over the place. And of note, again, I shouldn't be like bad mouthing this on video, but like they have some investors who it's fine.
No, actually, I did want to turn it on off right here, so.
Pause. Rewind.
I didn't say anything about any investors.
Only good things to say.
Yeah, I love all of UBCs.